Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: Gaza ceasefire talks are at an impasse as Qatar says it's reviewing its role as the mediator between Hamas and Israel. Our other headlines: at least 11 Palestinians are killed in the latest Israeli strike on Rafah, where more than 1.5 million displaced people fear an imminent ground invasion. The conflict in the Middle East dominates talks as leaders from the G7 group of countries meet in Italy. And China and Indonesia call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as the foreign ministers meet in Jakarta. Negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza are at an impasse, with Qatar reviewing its role as the mediator in the talks between Israel and the Palestinian armed group Hamas. Qatari leaders say efforts are being undermined by some parties for political interest. Attempts to secure a ceasefire have been fragile and largely unsuccessful, but Qatar's role is regarded as crucial. Hamas rejected the latest proposal of a pause in the fighting and the return of 40 Israeli hostages. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Sarah Coates, who's in Tel Aviv. Sarah, how is Israel responding to this reported breakdown in ceasefire negotiations?
Jamie, no response yet from Israeli officials, but if you talk to people on the street here, they will most likely tell you that they are not surprised. There is distrust in Qatar as a mediator, given its links to Hamas, and there's also, of course, widespread belief that Hamas never really wanted to agree to any kind of deal that would see the release of these some 130 hostages, given that they really are one of the group's main bargaining chips. Certainly, though, a lot of hurt being felt among the families of these people who do remain in the Strip. They'd really been clinging on to hope that this could be a chance to see their loved ones released, especially before the Jewish holiday of Passover, which is beginning this Monday. And Jamie, this comes amid reports in the United States citing senior US officials as saying that fewer hostages may be alive than is publicly known. So, as I mentioned, certainly very difficult for these families, and they are once again planning another mass rally here in Tel Aviv this weekend, calling for an immediate deal to be done.
And what's the latest on Israel's potential retaliation to Iran's missile and drone strike?
Well, Israeli officials are vowing that there will be a response. There are reports today in Hebrew media that the Israeli War Cabinet has already drawn up, already approved a number of measures, certainly very concerning, though, to the international community. Israel is really of the belief that this unprecedented attack last Saturday simply cannot go unpunished, and it does appear, Jamie, as though there are already preparations being made. A little earlier today, the Rambam Hospital, that's the largest medical facility in Israel's north, it has been drilling for a mass casualty event. Let's take a little listen to what a former military commander had to say.
In the military history, this is the largest attack that ever happened, the combination of all those missiles, UAVs and cruise missiles, and we had to prepare ourselves to this. And as I said, this was exactly why we established in the last few years the multi-tier defense, and indeed everything was working as we would expect it.
And Jamie, Axios is reporting, according to US officials, citing US officials, that there will be a virtual meeting between Biden administration officials and Israeli officials in the coming hours, amid reports that the United States has okayed Israel's plans to go into Rafah, that southern city of Rafah in Gaza, if it limits its response to Iran.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. At least 11 people, including 5 children, have been killed in the latest Israeli strikes on Rafah, where more than 1 million displaced Palestinians fear an imminent ground invasion. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari is in Gaza. Akram, what more do we know about this latest attack on Rafah?
The attack targeted a Palestinian family that is displaced already from Beit Hanun area in the very north of the Gaza Strip that came to Rafah and there was seeking shelter. The number of people who are killed is 12, and the number of children among people killed is 5 children. That happened overnight, and also it was coupled with some other bombardments in all different parts of Rafah, including the very southern part of Rafah, where a major, very big explosion took place and shook the Rafah city from its all different corners. It was an attack that apparently targeted one agriculture area. When they say an agriculture area was targeted or an open area was targeted, that means that this is an area that was targeted for some reasons that are related to the Palestinian factions. Either they are openings of tunnels or some areas where military action is taking place underground. The intelligence effort has been underway for the last few days. You could see in this particular area quadcopters all over overnight. They hovering all over the place, flying at a very low level, checking people. Apparently they are scanning for some military targets. So Rafah witnesses intensified military and intelligence activity, and it looks like this is somehow a preparation for some looming ground operation that people of Rafah and all over the Gaza Strip expect to take place sometime very soon.
Several food convoys have arrived in Gaza. We know the aid situation is dire. What impact are these deliveries having?
Well, as a matter of fact, the impact of those delivery of aid, those trucks for the delivery of aid is minimum, given the number of trucks that are allowed into the Gaza Strip. In Gaza Strip, there is around 700,000 Gazans. 300,000 of them are in Gaza City. 700,000 of them are in the Gaza northern part, which is Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, and Jabalia. So when you are providing that number of people with around 5 trucks a day, 10 trucks a day, 15 trucks a day, that is nothing compared to the need of the people who are living in that area. People are not living an ordinary situation. People are living war situation where the infrastructure is totally destroyed in Gaza Strip and where the need of the population to food is more than ever. For the children, for the elderly people, for the average people as well. So the number of truckloads that are allowed into Gaza and the north and at the Gaza Strip at large are below the minimum, and there has been some concerns raised and voiced by different UN officials, including the World Health Organization, the UNRWA itself, and the World Food Programme, saying that whatever is allowed into the Gaza Strip is minimum and is not going to prevent the looming famine that is going to hit Gaza. So it is the minimum, and they want, and all the international actors, even the American administration, the EU, have been asking and calling upon the Israeli occupation to allow more truck roads into Gaza Strip, but that does not seem to be happening anytime soon.
Akram, thank you for that. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in Gaza. Members of the G7 are meeting on the Italian island of Capri, with the Middle East and Ukraine set to dominate their talks. Foreign ministers from the group of 7 countries, as well as the EU, are discussing possible sanctions on Iran following its retaliatory attack on Israel at the weekend. Italy, which holds the G7's rotating presidency, is pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza and a de-escalation of Middle East tensions. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Giles Gibson, who is in Capri. Giles, some of the delegates have been speaking ahead of the summit itself. What are they saying?
Well, right at the start of the day, we saw Antonio Tajani, the Italian foreign minister, saying that they were going to be working out how to respond to Iran with sanctions. That response to those drone and missile strikes that Iran carried out on Israeli territory over the weekend. And we are already seeing clear signs that individual members of the G7 are moving forward with a set of sanctions. We've got the US saying very clearly that they're going to, in the next few days, place sanctions that are targeted specifically on Iran's on their drone and their missile programs within the country. We've also seen at the European Council summit in Brussels, European leaders making a very similar pledge to go after specifically those drone and missile programs. So what I think we still need to see over the next 24 hours or so as this meeting wraps up on Fridays to see whether the G7 members as a whole can coalesce around a specific set of actions and potentially sanctions when it comes to Iran. We've also been hearing from Josep Borrell, who's the European Union's top diplomat, as he was heading into the meeting, saying that yes, they do want to see de-escalation between Israel and Iran, but they also don't want to forget the conflict in Gaza. Take a listen.
We cannot escalate. We cannot go step by step, answering every time higher to a regional war. I don't want to exaggerate, but we are on the edge of a war, a regional war in the Middle East, which will be sending shock waves to the rest of the world, and in particular to Europe.
Giles, as you touched on, Ukraine's foreign minister also attending this event, seeking further support from the G7.
Yeah, and in particular, Dmytro Kuleba, the Ukrainian foreign minister, wants to see the G7 really stepping up and delivering more in terms of air defense systems as Ukraine faces drone and missile strikes as well, pretty much on a daily basis from Russia. And he drew this fascinating contrast between the way that G7 allies such as the US and the UK deal with Israel and how they deal with Ukraine. So he used the word strategy, and he said their strategy with Israel was to prevent damage and death. So a clear reference there to the fact that the US and the UK and other allies stepped in and shot down drones and missiles that were heading from Iran onto Israeli territory. And then he said when it comes to Ukraine, they help Ukraine to recover from damage, and then they express sympathy for the death of Ukrainian civilians. So just a very clear call from the Ukrainian foreign minister that as these countries support Israel, he wants to see them supporting his country as well in terms of the onslaught that they're facing from Russia from the air.
Giles, thank you for that. Our correspondent Giles Gibson in Capri. Foreign ministers from China and Indonesia have called for an immediate and lasting ceasefire in Gaza. Wang Yi met his Indonesian counterpart in Jakarta, where they agreed to strengthen ties and commit to maintaining regional peace. Our correspondent Robelin Perber reports.
China's foreign minister, Mr. Wang Yi, started off the day with a meeting with Indonesia's foreign minister, Madam Retno Marsudi, where they talked about strengthening economic cooperation to achieve regional stability in the region. Now, Mr. Wang Yi also met with President Joko Widodo, and they talked about food security out of a number of topics. Also, they talked about conflict in the Middle East, particularly in the Gaza Strip. Previously, Minister Retno and Minister Wang Yi have both agreed that they will both countries will support Palestine in the United Nations membership, and also they both emphasize on self-restraint and also on de-escalation of tension.
We unanimously believe that UN Security Council resolutions should be fully implemented, an unconditional and lasting ceasefire should be implemented immediately, and civilians should be protected. China supports the UN Security Council's discussion and acceptance of Palestine becoming a full member as soon as possible.
Now, Mr. Wang Yi will be in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia's eastern area, Labuan Bajo, on Friday to hold economic cooperation talks with Indonesia's Foreign Minister, Retno Marsudi, and also with Indonesia's Coordinating Minister for Maritime Affairs and Investment, Mr. Luhut Panjaitan. Now, China, is Indonesia's biggest trading partner at 127 billion USD of trade as of 2023. As well, China is also a big investor in Indonesia at 7.4 billion USD invested. And so far, the president-elect, Mr. Prabowo Subianto, also vows to continue said program by Mr. Joko Widodo, which means further economic cooperation with China will definitely further continue smoothly.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, how to make Europe more competitive with the United States and China. EU leaders gather in Brussels.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Gaza ceasefire talks are at an impasse as Qatar says it's reviewing its role as the mediator between Hamas and Israel. Our other headlines, at least 11 Palestinians are killed in the latest Israeli strike on Rafah, where more than 1.5 million displaced people fear an imminent ground invasion. And the conflict in the Middle East dominates the talks as leaders from the G7 group of countries meet in Italy. Well, how to catch up with China and the United States when it comes to green and digital technologies. That's the focus of meetings at an informal summit of European Union leaders in Brussels. A 9-point plan to boost the EU's competitiveness includes deepening the single market. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Stuart Smith, watching events for us in Brussels. Stuart, just talk us through what has been discussed.
Well, catching up, some EU leaders here would say, is even a bit of a too mighty task. They're talking about not falling as far behind as the United States and China, particularly when it comes to broader investment in the single market, with the 27 countries all part of the EU, but to different degrees have to follow EU laws. Some things are for national laws, other things rely on EU legislation. And what they're discussing is how they can be more joined up in that legislation in a way that would attract more investment. And so, on the face of it, that seems like perhaps a simple thing to do. The EU just needs to create more joined-up thinking at the EU level, but that's exactly what is contentious here, because France and Germany, the two biggest economies in the European Union, are suggesting and are debating today that the best way to do that would be to have an EU watchdog that would take care of private markets. But that means delivering more power to the European Union, and therefore some countries like Ireland and Luxembourg say they don't want an EU watchdog to have such a powerful role. But the argument is there has to be some measures taken by the European Union to stand any chance of competition. And the author of the report, a former Italian Prime Minister, Enrico Letta, has said that the bloc is running out of time. There's no time to waste, he says. The gap between the bloc and its competitors is getting bigger and bigger.
The leaders have set out a 9-point plan. Talking is always easier than doing, isn't it? How likely is it that this plan will be put into action?
We already know that a new draft text has been produced on Thursday, so the immediate plan, and we heard this earlier in the day as well, was already said by some EU leaders not to be good enough. There are those concerns, those classic concerns here in the European Union about delegating more authority to Brussels, with other countries, though, saying that's exactly what has to happen for a more joined-up single market when it comes to investment and things like that. The other big concern is what's going to pay for all of this. Where could that funding come from? With, again, some member states saying, well, let's use public finance, but that would mean increasing EU debt. And countries like Austria say that's a no-go for them. They're very concerned about debt levels, as they already are. So something is likely to be decided today, but that something is likely to be more strategic, more global in thinking, not a step-by-step guide as to how to catch up with the United States and China. That level of detail will happen later.
Stuart, thank you for that. Our correspondent Stuart Smith in Brussels. At least 20 people are now known to have been killed across Oman and the neighbouring United Arab Emirates after the Gulf was hit by severe storms and flooding. Clean-up operations are underway in Dubai after the city saw the heaviest rainfall ever recorded. John Gambrell from the Associated Press reports.
Dubai is still trying to dry out after that torrential rainstorm that struck the Sheikhdom as well as the wider United Arab Emirates on Tuesday, dumping that record amount of rain. At Dubai International Airport, which is the busiest for international travel, they're starting to allow other airlines to land there at their Terminal 1, and Emirates, the long-haul carrier synonymous with Dubai, has begun also admitting passengers from the Dubai side into the airport over the last couple of days since the storm. They've only really been servicing those who are already in Dubai on connecting flights, trying to get them onto their other location, as they were struggling to have room on the runway and the taxiways for all the aircraft coming in and coming out. The sign that they're opening up the check-in really shows that they're trying to get everything back on track, but it may still be days to rebook all those passengers who have already had their travel disrupted. That's a huge thing for Dubai, which is also a major tourist hub. Now, today I was out in Dubai at a couple of different locations. In some spots, it looks like business as usual. People are back out at the grocery store. They're out in the community, some riding bikes, some out with their families as school was declared off for the rest of the week, as well as some people were working from home. But in other pockets, it's actually getting worse. In one community that's out in the desert known as Mudan, the water actually has risen in the last day or so. That's what residents there told me as I waded through about a meter deep water there. They blamed a sewage treatment plant from up the road that would stop pumping, as well as some other issues that really had seen that water dump down. Meanwhile, we're still seeing the police, ambulances, and other rescue personnel out on the streets at that Mudan area. They did have pumps out. They were trying to pump. They had civil defense officials with rafts going through the flooded streets, handing out bottles of water, and people said that they appreciated the work that was being done, but acknowledged there was more yet to do. I'm John Gambrell with the Associated Press for CGTN in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates.
More than 11,000 people have been warned to leave their homes as authorities expand the exclusion zone after a volcano erupted in Indonesia. Mount Ruang on the island of Sulawesi sent plumes of lava, rock and ash 3 kilometers into the air. The authorities have cordoned off a 6-kilometer area around the volcano and closed the nearby regional airport as a precaution. China has accused the United States of stirring up military tensions in the Asia-Pacific after it made its first mid-range missile deployment in the Philippines. It was installed as part of recent joint US-Philippine military exercises that take place every year. Beijing has previously warned of countermeasures as the missile system is in striking distance of the Chinese mainland and Taiwan. A Sydney shopping centre that was the scene of the deadly mass stabbing has now reopened for the first time since the attack to allow members of the public to pay their respects. Shops remain closed, but white flowers were laid out on the second floor. On Saturday, a man wielding a knife entered the mall at Bondi, killing 6 people and injuring 12 others before he was shot dead by the police. Croatia's ruling Conservative Party has won the most seats in the parliamentary election, but failed to secure a majority and now faces tough talks to form a coalition government. Prime Minister Andrei Plenković's HDZ party secured 60 out of the 151 seats in the assembly. The nationalist right-wing Homeland movement could emerge as the kingmaker, although it has not revealed which party, if any, it would back. The huge power of female consumers is a key focus at one of the world's biggest trade fairs. The 4th China International Consumer Products Expo is celebrating what's become known as the she economy. Our correspondent Zhu Zhu reports.
Well, for every 3 lipsticks exported from France, 1 is purchased by Chinese consumers. This is a remark made by L'Oreal China CEO, highlighting a snapshot of China's she economy. Jewelries, beauty products, fashion show, this year's China International Consumer Products Expo also underscores the essence of the she economy. Well, what surprised me is that even in the traditionally male-dominated realm of sports cars, the number of female consumers is rapidly growing.
There are more females in comparison to the world average, not only in the super SUV, but also in our super sport cars.
As spending capabilities expand, what are some emerging trends in women's shopping? I found a jewelry booth teeming with many female consumers. This crown was once worn by Miss Czech Republic. Wow. Ta-da! Well, I feel like I am Miss Pavilion 4 for today now. Guess how much it is? Ta-da! It's 168 yuan, so that's less than $30 US.
捷克水晶，欧洲的水晶，准确的来说，我们都是用天然石英砂。
We use natural quartz sand and employ a series of processes including melting, purification, cutting, and inlaying to craft our crystals. Czech crystal is recognized as intangible cultural heritage with its value lying in its craftsmanship. Despite its luxurious appearance, it's actually quite affordable.
适合自己个性的价格就是
As long as it complements my personality and falls within my acceptable price range, it's perfect.
They don't blindly purchase big names. Instead, they prioritize value for money, opting for uniquely designed products. According to data from consulting firm Accenture, China has 400 million female consumers aged 20 to 60, with an annual spending power of up to 10 trillion yuan, or about $1.4 trillion US, close to the total retail market value of Germany, France, and the UK. Zhu Zhu, CGTN, Haikou in Hainan Province.
The headlines again. Gaza ceasefire talks are at an impasse as Qatar says it's reviewing its role as the mediator between Hamas and Israel. Our other headlines, at least 11 Palestinians are killed in the latest Israeli strike on Rafah, where more than 1.5 million displaced people fear an imminent ground invasion. And the conflict in the Middle East dominates the talks as leaders from the G7 group of countries meets in Italy. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.